All right, recording is started, Zoom is started, and I am dropping off.
Thanks, Eric.
We are all set. Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Planning Board here in the city of Birmingham for a rather balmy Wednesday, March 10th, 2021. Could we please call the roll? And if I could remind you all just to indicate your location when you indicate your presence, please.
Thank you. Scott Klein.
Present from the city of Birmingham.
Robin Boyle.
Here, City of Birmingham.
Stuart Jeffries.
Here, City of Birmingham.
Bert Kosick.
Here, Birmingham, Michigan.
Daniel Scher.
Here, Birmingham, Michigan.
Brian Williams.
Present, City of Birmingham.
Janelle Wolpe-Boyce.
Here, Birmingham, Michigan.
Jason Emmerich.
Here, Birmingham, Michigan.
Nassim Merman.
Here in Birmingham.
Daniel Murphy. Jane Weinman.
Oh, Daniel Murphy is here, Birmingham.
Great. Jane Weinman. Okay, we're all set.
And Jana, our captioner has arrived. If you want to switch over to her, it says captioner Joanne.
I already did.
Good, awesome,
Wonderful.
thank you.
Thank you. Let's move along. Review and approval of the minutes from the meeting on January 24th. Are there any comments from the board? Mr. Scher.
Yeah, in both the resolutions for the SLUP and the final site plan approval for Birmingham Pub, condition 1, I think, if I remember right, we decided that we would designate the Bowers elevation as the principal building frontage. If that's true, then we need to drop the phrase, or the applicant reduces the overall building signage by 47.76 square feet.
Okay.
Any other comments from the board? I have one quick one. It's on page, well, it's 6 of the minutes, and it looks like it's 8 of the packet. The top of it's the first sentence and paragraph. Chairman Klein said the zigzag path. There's just some grammar there that doesn't add up. I think it was just a transposing. You know, it should just be cleaned up to say that I said the zigzag pattern that would result from the addition of the dining pods would have negative ramifications for those with visually impaired. Okay.
Okay.
Seeing no other comments, do we have a motion to approve as amended?
Move as to approve the minutes as amended.
The motion, Mr. Scher. Do we have a second? Report by Mr. Williams. Any conversation at the board level? No? Could we please call the roll?
Daniel Scher.
Yes.
Brian Williams.
Yes.
Janelle Wolpe-Boyce.
Yes.
Robin Boyle. Do we still have Mr. Boyle?
He's on mute.
Looks
Mr.
like he's-
Boyle, can you try to unmute yourself?
Yes.
There we go.
Thank you. Scott Klein. Scott Klein. Scott Klein.
Yes, I apologize. I was having technical difficulties. I lost
It's okay.
my train of thought.
No problem. Stuart Jeffries.
Yes.
Bert Kosick.
Yes.
Okay.
So I apologize. I was not present during any of that. Was the motion?
Scott, you went on mute again.
Was the motion carried, please? I was having technical difficulties.
Yes,
could
the
not hear.
motion carried.
Motion carried. Thank you.
Yes.
I apologize for
Mhm.
that.
No problem.
We will move into chairperson's comments. Tonight we are having a study session, and it is a good old-fashioned study session with a number of items related to not only the master plan, but also other elements of our ordinance as directed by the city commission. I will have more comments as we get into individual sections of tonight. However, I will say for those here tonight related to the master plan, tonight's meeting is about the summary of comments prepared by the consultant, the summary of direction that the residents of this community and this board have put together and put forth to our consultant over the course of the last 6 months worth of public hearing. Tonight is not about public comment related to individual specific elements of the plan. So if you are new to the plan, if you are here to provide your input on ADUs or themes or parking or neighborhood boundaries, I appreciate your interest and your import into this matter. However, we will be not talking about those details tonight. We have had 6 months worth of input and comments. Those of you that have provided emails to staff over the course of the last few weeks, those emails are received and have been included in our packet and forwarded to the consultant. Those of you who continue to provide email input or go to the birminghamplan.com, I believe it is, to provide your input online, those comments are also going to be forwarded to this body, to the City Commission, as well as the consultant. However, tonight's conversation is going to be brief. It is going to be focused upon the direction, the summary of direction that has been provided by the consultant to ensure that the direction is proper for draft 2. I ask that when there is time for public comment, keep your comments brief and to the point related to the summary, and not dive into the weeds on elements of the plan. The time for that is not tonight. There will be a second round of detailed public input as we get to draft 2 later this year, so fear not. When we do get to public input, I will announce it as such, and I would ask you to use the raise hand function, which is at the bottom center console of your Zoom. If you click the raise hand, I will do my best. I've got a list of all participants. I'll do my best to call out those in order in which I see them. I'll ask you for your name and place of residence. Please provide that for the record, and then provide your brief comments related to the summary and direction that we are giving to the consultant. With that, Jana, are there any changes to the agenda as published?
There are not, but I didn't know if you wanted to have our new student representative introduce himself. We have 2, but only one is in
Thank you
attendance.
very much. I would like to say welcome to Daniel. Welcome as our student representative. You are absolutely a part of the board as far as conversation goes. You will not have a vote. So, I don't know if we can get his camera on or if he's prepared for that, but if you have any comments, please also raise your hand. I'll do my best to allow you some opportunity to speak as well. And welcome.
There we go.
Welcome, Daniel.
Hey, I wasn't sure if I should receive an email. I was at the last meeting, so I'm glad that you introduced me, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to sit on the board, and I'm excited about learning about Birmingham and just learning more about city government.
Fantastic. Well, you picked the most exciting board in the history of boards. So welcome to you. Let us move along into our study session. Item number 1, direction from review of first draft of the 2040 Birmingham plan. I don't know that I need any further comments or instructions. Jana, do you have any introduction prior to moving into a conversation at the board level?
Well, I just wanted to give you a little minute, if you can give me a minute's worth of time here.
Please.
Just for the public that's watching, as our chairman just mentioned, this is just to wrap up and review, provide direction on the inclusion of the discussed change to them from the draft to the second draft. And I just wanted to point out that on Monday night at the City Commission level, there was a resolution that outlined the remainder of the review process for the master plan, just for the general public, so they could understand what's involved.
It would appear that Ms. Ecker's having some technical issues tonight as well. Ms. Ecker, are you back?
I think my connection went out.
It
Yes,
did,
my connection went unstable. I'm sorry. So I'm not exactly sure what you heard and didn't hear.
Not much.
Not much.
What's that?
Not much.
Not much. Okay. Okay. Well, tonight's purpose is for the board to review the comments and basically provide direction for the changes to be made from the first draft to the second draft. I just wanted to point out that at the commission on Monday night, there was a resolution that outlined the remainder of the process for the review of the master plan. So just to summarize for anybody watching that's just starting to pay attention to this project, the first draft You've heard a lot of input over the past year. You're going to provide direction tonight as to which changes to be included in the second draft of the master plan. These changes or these recommended revisions and directions will then go to the city commission at their next meeting for them to review what your comments are for the draft or the changes from the first draft to the second draft. The consultants will prepare the second draft. It's expected around May of this year, and then we'll go through a review of the second draft and then go to a final draft, which will then have to be noticed and go through the proper requirements for public notice to surrounding communities, et cetera, before we go to a final consideration at a public hearing at the planning board and the city commission of the final draft of the plan. So essentially, we're looking at, maybe wrapping this project up by the end of the year as a ballpark. And that's all I wanted to say. I just wanted to summarize that.
Okay. Well, I'd like to actually give staff a pat on the back on this, as well as the consultant, because in addition, your memo calls out what I think is important for the public to hear is that, we started this process in 2019 with multiple public hearings at the planning board and city commission. We've had a week-long open house charrette, multi-day drop-in clinic, multiple roundtable discussions with residents, stakeholders, property owners, 3 online surveys, as well as a public website and social media, where not only is information provided, but it is also set up to receive input and comment. I'd like to just say thank you to the consultant, to staff and city administration for what I would consider to be one of the most well-done engagement processes in a master plan that I could at least remember. I don't know if the rest of the board feels the same way, but I appreciate all the efforts that have been put into this. And for those watching, whether here on the meeting or at home on television, it has been an extensive process of gathering, feeding input, which has led us to this point. With that, board, we were provided a letter. We have our consultants, Matt Lambert and Sarah Traxler, who are here tonight. Certainly can provide any color and insight we may want. However, we have a letter which is a high-level summary of the direction that the community and that this board has provided over the course of the last 6 or so months of public input on this project. And I guess at this point, before I go to the public for any comment, I'd like to throw it to the board. Are there comments, corrections, augmentations that you feel appropriate at this point for this level of summary? And we'll start with Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. I just point out for the public that was trying to follow Jana's comments that the resolution, I believe, is actually in our materials, right, Jana, that was adopted. And so the public can go online and see the process that will follow and some 10 steps that were adopted in the resolution on Monday night, in case you want to look for it and quantify it. And I would point out simply that there'll be a number of public hearings in connection with draft number 2. First of all, I reviewed in detail. The 5-page summary is now in the amended agenda, which also is online and available to the public. I had one thought in general, and just wanted to share that the letter divides up into 3 different sections. One general direction, then specific direction related to mixed-use units, and specific direction related to neighborhoods. Matt, I think the only comment I had was I didn't see anything in here about what I would call findings. There were some findings, and there are findings in the original master plan, in particular as it relates to direction to the neighborhood. Number 2, dealing with everybody's favorite topic, themes. I think the one thing we ought to probably say in some form of communication is the projection as to potential population increase has changed from what is an original plan from 2,000, I think, to 1,000. And I noticed that everybody's favorite newspaper still had it wrong last week on the number of the population. So I would like to see it in the summary which goes to the city commission, in effect, the correction, Matt, that you've made orally. And I think the best place to put it, if we're not going to have a specifics finding section, is somehow put it in the direction related to neighborhood. That's my specific comments. In general, let me say, I think the 5-page summary is well done. In fact, I would say very well done. And I think it answers a lot of the questions that we had, a lot of the direction that not only we've given, but that residents have given. And in particular, I don't know whether it's 95% of the comments related to neighborhoods, which I've already discussed. And I think you've handled that extraordinarily well. I would also like to say that in terms of themes, that I do like the reference to Woodward and crossing of Woodward. I do think maybe we could talk about specifics, maybe having the city understand that it's not just crossings of Woodward, it's, as you point out, slowing of the traffic on Woodward. So those are my specific comments, but I think in general, the 5-page summary, which is short and sweet, is very well done. Thank you.
Right,
And I'll just add a note that in terms of the finding that you mentioned, that also relates to an item that we located under general, which had to do with where growth should be prioritized overall. So
Right.
there's these things that link between section and section, but hopefully maybe we can clarify that a little bit more too.
Thank you.
Excellent. Mr. Kozak.
So I have to agree with Brian. I think, Scott, you said it is. I mean, this showed you guys took good notes and you listened and you picked up a lot of details over the many months of our having meetings with you. Just a couple of comments. Just lost it. Let me do it off the top of my head here. So when you talk about Woodward pedestrian crossings, or no, you talk about the speed of Woodward coming north of Maple, I would say north of 14 Mile and south of 16. So I think that whole, I don't see north of Maple being any different than south of Maple. When you talk about, and again, I lost my notes, but when you talk about green and sustainability, I think you need to describe what those are. Everybody uses those terms, and I think you need to. And I know this is really for the next steps, and we'll dive into those more deeply. But as we move into it, sustainability, what does that mean? It means lots of different things to different people. And then the one that maybe bothers me a little bit, and I know it's just requires further study, in the residential or neighborhood section, you talk about incentives for renovation, versus new construction. And that's not always the best answer, because just because it's and I believe in preserving our neighborhoods and the character of our neighborhoods and the scale of our neighborhoods. So I know where you're going with this, but I just want to make sure we don't incentivize something that might be the right answer for some things, but it may be absolutely the wrong answer for other things. So I know you're looking to study this more detail, but I want to be careful to make such a broad statement that, thou shalt incentivize renovation over. And I'll give you an example. I think I referenced this before. We do college and university work, and the state of Michigan was giving priority to projects that were renovation and addition versus building new. Well, sometimes that was just the wrong answer, and you spend more money doing that. And so, but let's just make sure we're I think the goal is to make great neighborhoods and to preserve the scale and quality of the architecture and value. And so, anyways, I just applaud you that there's a whole list of things here, and it showed that you listened. And I think I think as a master planner, it's your job to take us beyond our comfort zone and let us know what's happening throughout the rest of the world. And I know certainly I've been sort of vocal trying to pull you back a little bit. And I think this would be a great next step to dive into these things in more detail. Thank you.
That was razor sharp on the, I knew reviewing the comments on the renovation thing that it's something that we really need to pay specific attention to. So I appreciate, you're calling that out. And, I would note on the Woodward piece that we've discussed in these meetings, issues that we did cover in the plan. There was so much in there that it's hard to pull out that, we spoke quite a bit about the speeds, but there was a specific set of comments that said that the area north of Maple is specifically different because of the way that Woodward enters from the north. So I appreciate both sets of comments that one, overall the discussion on Woodward should be more prominent, and two, that there's a different condition that should certainly be
very different condition.
investigated.
You're right, but I think as long as we're studying it, let's look at the whole mall section.
Mr. Chair.
So I'll join the chorus. The letter's really outstanding. You guys did a great job of listening and synthesizing. I do have a couple of, I guess I'd call them nuance points, just to make sure they're there on the subject of sustainability. I don't think we talked about electric charging stations, but I think that's something that ought to be considered in the final master plan, especially since so many manufacturers have announced that by the time this plan's in full swing, they're going to be all electric. In the section, the recommendation about new historic districts, I think may want to both think about new ones, and also perhaps there are things to do to strengthen the existing historic district as well. The point where it says addressing how the abandoned portion of Old Woodward south of Haynes should be sold. I guess I wasn't sure what you were meaning by sold. I kind of assumed it was how it would be planned or used or zoned. Didn't think it was our place to either necessarily recommend something be sold or not sold. On the housing proposals on South Old Woodward, I think that in addition to buffering noise, I think we talked about preventing hazardous cross traffic on the streets where you have those streets coming in at an angle, cars pulling into the commercial or now residential zones, and protecting that. And then lastly, on talking about incentivizing renovation, I'm uncomfortable with the word incentivizing. People could interpret it to mean a monetary incentive, and I don't think that's what any of us have in mind. So it's, planning techniques or planning incentives or something of that nature, just to make sure that nobody's misled that we're, trying to force a budgetary choice onto the city. So those are just a few thoughts, but as you can tell, they're more kind of helping to focus rather than, conceptually. You did a great job, and I think all the points are well done and well taken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks. And those are two questions that we had in that I had in how to phrase those statements, because I understand there's more nuance to both of those. So thanks for pointing those out.
All right, Mr. Boyle, you were next.
Yeah, I'd been reading this 5-page note, and then I went back to look at the themes and the plan itself, and began to think of, in 3 years' time, what do I want to say about this plan? So I came up with a lot of adjectives, most of which, I think we can all understand, but 3 of them really jumped out. And I want to put my name to this plan in 3 distinctive ways. One, I want to make it relevant. I want to make this relevant to where we are. And I think although we mentioned COVID a couple of times, I would urge that we actually consider drafting a prologue that draws attention to the fact that when this was prepared, we were going through a pandemic that has implications for how we do our business. It does. We came out of density, and that's been at the core of this whole discussion. So if we ignore density and don't even discuss it, or don't talk about open space, or don't talk about distance, then I think we're not being relevant. So I'd urge you, as they go into this draft 2, that we make this relevant. Second, I want, and I've bored too many cohorts of students with this plan needs to be distinctive. It shouldn't just be a run-of-the-mill plan. This is not a run-of-the-mill place. And you've devoted a huge amount of time to this. And I think we need to make sure that we are distinctive and that our plan is just that. And one idea that I've knocked around, and I think it's relevant also in the fact that we need to have some clarity of numbers. We're about to get the census released slowly over the next year, and I think we should take that on board and have it as part of the plan. What about having something like a simple dashboard about Birmingham in terms of households, population size, permitting and all that? It's something that we can do, and we can make that as a front piece. It doesn't have to begin with a history of Detroit. It doesn't have to begin with the history of Birmingham. We can jump straight in and talk about where Birmingham is today. And thirdly, and I'm going to be a little bit controversial here, I want this plan to be bold. I think I'm listening to the public and hearing comments that suggest leave our neighborhoods alone, but consider being bold in some other elements. And we've got a history of taking on the triangle and the rail district and the downtown. And Matt, you said it yourself in your note and in the plan. Not very successful in these areas. So why don't we try and be more successful about doing that? And if in 3 or 5 years or 10 years time, people can say that our plan was relevant, was distinctive, and was bold, then I think we'll have done our job. There's a lot in the 5-page memo. We could discuss it for weeks, never mind it. But I think if we try and stick to this high-level guide that the city can use, that the public can understand, they can read it, and they can put it on their shelf and be fairly pleased with it, I think that's what we should do.
Thank you, Mr. Boyle. Ms. Boyce.
I have just a couple questions in going through the summary. There were a few items in here that I don't remember us discussing, or maybe I don't remember what direction we were going to take on them. And I wanted to ask specifically about the category of the mixed use districts, item number 3 in the downtown section, that states retail district standards should be lightened on side streets. And I'm not sure what that was or is. And
yeah, there was a set of discussions, and I think it came up across 2 meetings. One was much earlier in the review process, and then later there were some minor comments when we started talking a little bit about COVID. But the discussion had to do with some of the streets that weren't Woodward or Maple, and the amount of how onerous the standards are there compared to Maple and Woodward. Should the standards for the district be as at the same level across everywhere that currently is mapped, or are some of the streets that are not on those 2 main streets able to perhaps have a different set of standards, which allows more, say, ground floor office or other uses that have found their way to the rail district?
okay, thanks for clarifying. I had one other as well. And it's in the general direction category on the second page of the memo. And it's number 7 about schools being more prominently featured in the plan. And I know we talked about schools a lot throughout, but mostly I felt as though we were talking about schools as far as a resource for opinions and pooling of young families and that sort of thing. And I don't recall, what do you mean by number 7? Can you give a little more detail?
I would suggest it's one of the more difficult things to try to address, and something that I feel we'll be talking probably about a good bit more in the second run through. There were comments early on that had discussed the need to focus on schools, and then there were comments in reply to that saying that, well, you know, the city doesn't really have control over schools. And then later there were discussions around schools related to housing and family growth and so forth. And there were also discussions around the importance of schools for you know, value to the residences and new residents of the city. So it's a topic that early on there was a lot of recommendation that that schools be much more prominent in the plan, and then there was a lot of debate in terms of to what extent could you know, our schools actually informed by the master plan, yet they form such a important piece of the fabric of the city that they have to be central, whether or not we have a great deal of control over them. So I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work out in the end, but that's the sentiment that we got from the discussions.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for explaining.
Mr. Jeffrey.
Yeah, just a few things. The on the neighborhood destinations, maybe I'm just not reading it right, but my recollection is that nobody wanted to reduce the destinations that we have currently. So if this is meaning reduce the destinations proposed.
Yes.
Okay. And then maybe improve the ones we've got, but maybe not.
And there were and you had commented about, you know, some of the park-based ones and you know, gathering spaces, so that there was, it seemed like the sentiment was additional destinations are good, but you know, not so many, and the places proposed may not all be appropriate, but that they're a good goal to have.
I don't know if it's in this or it was something else, but we talked about prioritization. I think it was in maybe Jana's note or something. So when I think of prioritization, I think about when we started on this and a lot of the discussions of all the charrettes and all that. The thing that comes to mind, one of the top things that comes to mind at least, is the senior center. And I know there was some, you know, specifically where it is. Yeah, I don't know if we know that, but I think it's got to be something that is at the top of mind when we get to chapter 2 or our second draft of this. And then my third comment, and this comes from well, Robin's comment about the bold kind of jarred my last life alive again. And I did strategic planning for a large company. And when we would do a plan and we would look out, we usually had a 25-year horizon. We would always say if it was something in the plan that we could see ourselves doing like right now or yesterday, then maybe we haven't stretched enough. And then you begin to start questioning the longevity of the plan. If it looks like it's like, you know, it's kind of almost the difference between doing budgeting and business planning. Your budgeting is what I'm going to do right now. Business planning is what I'm going to do over the next, you know, longer period. And so I guess I would just say I agree with Robin's thing that there should be some pieces of this that we don't know how to do today. We might not do today, but it points us in the right direction so that we're prepared, 40 years down the road or 30 years down the road or whatever.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffries. Any other comments at the board level? No? I'll throw in just a couple of 2 cents. Again, I'm not going to reiterate everything they've said, but I agree with pretty much everything that my fellow board members have brought up. This was an excellent job, so please thank you for your diligence and listening. A couple of things, just 2 cents when it comes to schools. I think one of the things that jumps to me outside of what you've already said, Matt, was that perhaps there's an opportunity for just sharing of vision. I would assume the school board has some sort of long-range planning, and just making sure that we're doing our due diligence to be taking that into account. With regard to retail, I agree. This is really about the red line changes, and I think that's highly appropriate conversation for what we're talking about. COVID, I could not agree with Mr. Boyle more in his suggestions, and again, I will just reiterate that I tend to think that what this has taught me is that while 25, 30-year plans are great, we need to be able to have flexibility in what we're talking about in order to be able to adjust to things like this. Our world has changed over the last 18 months. And we need to make sure that what we're talking about is flexible enough to handle what may come next. Lastly, to the comment of bold, I would agree wholeheartedly. Mr. Boyle put it correctly when he said that the residents have been very clear that they want the single family neighborhoods left alone. And I respect that. And I think that we still need, however, to look at bold action or a stretch goal, as Mr. Jeffries might be alluding to, in other areas that would allow us to achieve where we want to be. Let's not look at this plan and say, everybody's happy and we didn't really change anything. We're just going to continue to do the same thing for the next 20 years, because that's going to be doomed to failure. But I do think that there are areas in which we can be bold that don't negatively impact single family residential neighborhoods as clearly the residents want us to avoid. So with that, I thank you. It looks like we've got no more further comments at the board level. I will now open it up to the public for brief comment. Again, use the raise your hand function at the center console. And again, I ask that we keep our comments focused on the summary and the direction and not diving back into the weeds. So, friend of the program, Mr. Bertolini. Larry, are you there, please?
Can you hear me?
There we go.
Okay,
Bertolini,
I'm sorry.
welcome.
Okay, I just wanted to, I don't know if this is a good time to bring this up, but I have a need at my house for a carport or open air structure. And I didn't know if that would be something for consideration on this, especially when you're bringing up COVID, but because the ordinance will count that as lot coverage, I was wondering if there would be the possibility of some reduced lot coverage to do something like that behind your house that would not cause drainage issues. So that was one. I wanted to thank the report for including Adams Square. I think that we could possibly address some beautification. It's a very big area where the parking lot is, so maybe something simple for beautification of Adams Square and some dialogue or something where the city can offer assistance, maybe money as far as helping to improve that appearance. I don't know if you talked at all about golf courses, or 2 golf courses, if there's any way that that could benefit our residents as far as other events or something. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Interesting point. Thank you very much. We'll quickly move along. Mr. Haig, Andrew, you there?
Good evening. Hopefully this is working.
Yes, we can hear you.
There goes.
Welcome.
Should be able to see me now. All right. Thank you, Scott. thank you, everybody. This has actually been the type of planning meeting I've been looking forward to, because this has been phenomenal commentary from everybody. I can't give credit to any individual specifically because there were so many good points brought up that we could actually talk about many of them for hours, which we're not going to do.
Which we won't.
I keep on having, it keeps on saying me start my video and then stop the video and then start it and stop it. So that's why my picture's coming and going. Sorry.
That's fine.
Just points. I am very glad to see the scope reduction. The feedback has really come back, but it really was trying to wrap its arms around too much. There are some points in here that I think, Matt, you've done an extremely good job of consolidating it down into a succinct set of points. So very good job on that. I appreciated it a lot. The point about the 2,000 out of 1,000, that must have been a verbal because I don't remember seeing it written anywhere. So that's probably why the newspaper got that wrong as well. So that was actually new news for me tonight. Thank you. Schools. Schools don't let us touch them within the city budget and the city millages. So we need to be very, very careful about how we approach anything with schools because they don't, to put it a little bit rudely, they don't play nice with us. They play on their terms. So let's be very careful about that. It is a draw, but if they're not going to reciprocate in kind, then it's a little bit of a questionable one there, I'm afraid. But overall, thank you for the reduction in scope. And I would like to know how this would work for the second draft from a mechanical standpoint, because there was an awful lot of work done with charrettes, various discussions with this first draft. The consolidation of points has been great. It's really going to narrow the focus down to a good set. But how do we go ahead? Because Scott, you said right at the beginning, try and work through it, or Scott and Jana, I think actually both said, try and work through it within the rest of the year. Well, it's taken us several years to get to this point, but the consolidation has narrowed the focus quite interestingly. But there's still a lot of things that merit an awful, I mean, the commentary tonight, I was really impressed, everybody, really seriously. This was awesome. How do we continue with that type of commentary to get the qualified feedback from everybody that has been creating these thought processes? If we could get into that and hopefully not have it compressed as in a, oops, there's a deadline, we've got to meet the deadline no matter what. I would be very disappointed that this significant progress would then trip over its own feet.
Thank you, Andrew. I can tell you there is no specific deadline. We are simply looking at anticipated timelines here, and we will have a second draft. This summer, I believe, is what we're targeting. At that point, there will be another series of meetings, and then the hope would be that it would be compacted enough that we are now, instead of talking about the large high level, we're getting down into the nitty gritty, and we're discussing the finer points and some of the conversations we're having right here. What does it mean to these philosophical points? So that is what we'll be attempting to do as we get into the fall and winter of the year.
One last thing, and this is from a multimodal board member perspective question. I just read today that Ferndale and Pleasant Ridge are actually pursuing narrowing of Woodward down to 3 lanes and putting in a bike lane. Ferndale is unique with their 35-mile-an-hour speed limit, but Pleasant Ridge is back up to 45, same as us. This is something that's come up in multimodal actually within the last 2 meetings ago, I think it was, Jana, where we actually had a lot of discussion about this. As we've been discussing specific points of crossings on Woodward, can we try and look further into this? Because obviously the narrowing, the traffic calming mentioned that you're correct, north of 14, not just north of 15, it's all interwoven very, very tightly. If somebody else can do it, what's stopping us? Because it's going to help with some of the points that you have here in the plan very, very, very well, actually. So it's just something I noted. It's obviously very recent. Let's see if we can splice together points, and then from the multimodal side, we'll see what we can do as well.
Right.
Yeah, Scott, I just if you don't mind, because the Woodward's come up a number of times, and I just wanted to point out during the charrette, we had the local rep from MDOT out, and we had a conversation specifically about Woodward, and at the time, essentially they said we'd love to see Woodward change, be reduced in lanes, be more friendly to pedestrians and cyclists and less auto-centric, but we don't have any money, and so we had a good conversation about that and their willingness to see change. I was actually just on a call yesterday elsewhere in the state with and some other this was East Lansing and some other MDOT districts, and they sort of had the same opinion on their major roadways. So there's the good thing is that the Department of Transportation is supportive of change that's pedestrian oriented, cyclist oriented. And it really came down to this question of who's paying for what and how does it get done when. So as you bring up these bold statements, there's a lot of opportunity for boldness there. I would just like one more thing. We did talk quite a bit about in the first draft of the plan between 14 and 15 mile and the pieces that stand in the way currently in policy. Some of them are state policy and so forth, and the goals to change some of those standards, which don't just affect Michigan, they also affect other states because they have the same policy elsewhere. And lastly, there was a statement back in the Charette meeting that the MDOT rep had stated a hope that their construction on 75, when it completed, would result in a reduced traffic load on Woodward. Who knows? But they were hopeful that would open the door for more reductions from the vehicular side of things and an increase on the pedestrian and bicyclist side of things. So I just wanted to reiterate that because we did put a lot of that in there, but I think it's often overlooked.
Great, thank you.
Scott, if I could respond to the
Mr. Williams.
Yeah, there are only two benefits to being old. One of them is you get your vaccine shot early. The other is you can remember, and in particular Ferndale. Ferndale used to have parking in the middle of Woodward back in the day. And so the reduction in speed was in part because people who parked in the middle had to get to the retail stores on the sides. When the retail parking went away, somehow Ferndale lobbied not to increase the speed limit from 35 to what is accepted as 45. So the history of Ferndale is interesting, but probably Royal Oak and Birmingham are more in the different category at this point. And it's going to be difficult, I agree, but it's not something we shouldn't try. Thanks.
All right, Jack Burns. Mr. Burns, are you available?
Yes, I am.
Hello, Mr. Burns.
Hello, I am available. I can't start my video, but
that's quite all right. What's your comment, sir?
First of all, I assume many of you get the Wall Street Journal, might have read last weekend's edition where it had a lengthy article called How Remote Work is Reshaping Americans' Urban Geography. First of all, I congratulate your entire team because this is probably the best time to be starting a plan, a development plan for our city. That article quotes that prior to the COVID, less than 10% of the Americans work remotely. Now they're saying up to 50% of the workforce is on what they call remote desktops. I would submit to you that many of those remote desktops are in Birmingham. They would call us a Zoom town. A Zoom town will succeed if it has what's called 15-minute neighborhoods. And that says that all necessities of life, and I'm quoting, all necessities of life, work, play, education can be found within a 15-minute walk or bike ride. I would submit to you that we are very close to that. The only component of that I question is education. We've got to get the Birmingham Board of Education on board with the plan. But just as importantly, I don't see any component for higher education. Is it feasible to pursue some type of facility or shared facility with all the components of higher education between OU and MSU and University of Michigan and LTU? None of those components are within Birmingham or the 15-minute neighborhood. Other than that, I congratulate you on what you've done, the progress you've made, and I thank you for your efforts.
Thank you much, Mr. Burns. Beth J. Is there a Beth J available?
Yes, I am here. I had a question regarding the south end of Old Woodward in this new plan. The renovations that have been done to Old Woodward and Maple over the last 4 years, my understanding is planned for the south end of Old Woodward next year. Some of the things in the new master plan are in contradiction to what the current road is. Are the updates that are scheduled for next year still taking place, or is the master plan superseding that?
I can answer that if you want.
Yeah,
Scott.
no, why don't you dive in?
Yes, there is a plan for phase 3, we call it, of the downtown streetscape improvements. It would run South Old Woodward from Brown all the way down to Lincoln. It would include the area that we're talking about for Haynes Square. And we actually just started internal meetings on pulling that project together, on the details and what type of infrastructure needs updated and all of that. And so we are definitely watching very closely what is going to be proposed in a master plan should this move through to approval. So at this point, we are keeping it in mind. We're early. I don't know that it's constructing or it's to be constructed next year, but I could be wrong. But certainly it's in the early phases right now. So we're just keeping an eye on this, and we're hoping that we'll have a better idea come fall when we have to start putting details, design details into the plans for that area, that we'll know better whether or not Haynes Square will be supported as part of the master plan.
Okay, I guess I would just like to, voice the feedback saying I certainly hope something is done, next year, and that because of this new plan, that south end of Old Woodward just needs so much work. And I would really hope that this wouldn't put this down the road even further than it was previously promised.
Excellent point. Thank you. Understood. Thank you, ma'am. Good point. All right, last few comments here. A gentleman by the name of Andy, if you could please, since your full name is not here, please tell us who you are when you come on.
Hi, this is Andy Bastille. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I want to thank the planning board for its great work. I'm always been impressed moving from San Francisco at the incredible sophistication of the city's planning. So I thank you as a resident. I wasn't too keen about the seams on Oak Street, so thanks for backing up on that too. But my comment is simply this, and I just a quick yes or no question. I apologize if it's based in ignorance. I think one of the most significant things that's going to happen in the next 25 years, and I was motivated by Robin's comments about boldness to ask this question. But the most significant thing I think is going to transpire in the coming decades is the advent of autonomous vehicles. And I may have missed it. I skimmed through the plan. I may have missed it. I apologize if I did. But is there any thought given to the implications of that? I don't suppose it's immediate enough to warrant any specific proposals today, but just in general, if it occurs in a decade, would the city be poised to react to it? I think the changes that it would impose on how people live and move about would be monumental. Really once in a century kind of impact. I just wondered if you had any thoughts about that.
Thank you. I mean, Matt, I don't know if there's anything in there yet about this. I know I have my own opinions that, it's probably 3 decades based on the lawyers and
It does keep
manufacturers
changing.
and the oil companies, but that's just me.
Well, we had some things in there about, other modes, more related to scooters and the other vehicles that are occurring, and less on the AV front. From AVs, what is seen as some of the biggest changes is really the rebalancing of curb space. Now, we didn't talk about that much in the plan, but the sort of advice around AVs and curb spaces, that curb space in the future becomes a more flexible commodity, which has an interesting overlap with the discussion about COVID and dining decks and sort of reimagining how that space is used. And then the other is parking, and overall the general assumption of reduction of parking should the AV future be a shared vehicle future. I think it's unsure whether it'll be a shared vehicle future or a private vehicle future, so there's a little bit of flexibility there. But in general, there's an assumption intention of a reduction of overall parking demand and more flexibility on curb space principally. Now there's other things that have to do with, are you going to be more willing to commute longer and so forth. And I think there's still a lot of debate in terms of how that meshes with, as was mentioned, the 15-minute city discussion, and how Birmingham fills that role between its downtown and neighborhoods. So there's definitely that interaction has perhaps had less definitive a future, though it does find its way to think that the city that has a structure based on both walkability in the 15-minute manner and access to open space and diverse places fares better, but then the region, that's a question of the competitiveness of downtown. And I think that COVID does put into question that whole office future, which was also brought up in terms of the work from home situation. So it's some complex calculus there, but it's certainly an interesting discussion. I think it's been brought up in a number of comments to date.
Thank you, Matt. All right, last couple of comments. We've got Mr. Bloom. David Bloom, are you here?
Yes. Hello. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Hi. I want to thank everyone for their great comments. There have been a lot of really interesting comments this evening. I'd like to touch on some of the comments from Mr. Boyle, and then some of the comments written by a gentleman that an email that he sent that is included in the packet, who served in the U.S. Marine Corps and scrimped and saved and was able to come to Birmingham and doesn't believe that we should be making changes that involve subsidizing housing and amenities for people that can't afford to be here. Mr. Boyle's comments about being bold, I think it's awesome. We live in a really cool community with people that have worked really hard to get here, and accomplished people, and people that want to be here and have invested and paid up and paid more money to be in this community. So we have a special community, and I think everyone agrees that we would like to keep it that way, and that's one of the reasons for planning for the future, like we're doing. What I would say is that there has been in the past quite a bit of pushback to this master plan, and as we go forward, if we're going to be bold, and I think we probably should, let's be bold with getting the residents pulling for this plan and pulling and pushing for a better plan and for a bold plan, rather than having residents feel like things are being done too quickly or rammed down our throats, and having us pull against it. So let's be bold. Let's have a great plan. Let's make sure that all the residents have had their input, felt that they've been heard, or most of the residents, and that this is the plan for our residents and for the future, and not by people outside trying to suggest what we should do, which is okay in the sense that it's suggestions, but we're the people who live here, who have invested in the community, who want to be here. And so we should all be part of the plan and have a plan that we're all proud to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom. Final comment of the evening. We'll go to Jeff Bozell. I hope I said that correctly, sir.
Yes, you did. Great job on that. Yeah, I've gotten different variations, but anyway, I've heard this comment a couple times, and as a resident of Birmingham and an attendee of various different board meetings, including school board, in light of the COVID pandemic, I'm curious as to the frustrations that certain people involved in this call, Mr. Haig spoke about in particular with school board, and what kind of outreach has gone on between the two boards. I haven't heard of the master plan brought up at these school board meetings, and so I was just curious as to one, what the buy-in needs to be between the two boards as it relates to the master plan, and two, what sort of frustration has been felt by the members on the board. Thank you for your time on it.
Well, I appreciate it. I'll answer, I guess, for the board, just say that I don't think that there was any frustration with the school board on this plan. As a parent of a high school student, I will defer to the discussion of frustrations on other matters. But with regard to this plan, no, I just think the point we brought up is that we wish to make sure that if the school board has information, they have data, they have plans, that this board would like to know about them. That's not to fault anybody. I think it's simply to point out that we would like to ensure that our due diligence is done and that we've made every attempt to communicate as best we can. We have no control of the school board and vice versa, but we certainly our futures are inexplicably linked. And I think that's simply what we're trying to accomplish with these comments tonight. With that, I see no other hands. We will bring it back to the board. Matt, Sarah, do you think you've had from us not only through the course of this, but any refinement here tonight?
Oh, absolutely. You know, like we said for a while, and as I wrote in the note, that people have been looking to see their voices heard in what is prepared in the plan, and you know, I think we've been looking forward to having the opportunity to revise. I do quite enjoy the goals of being bold and understanding where to focus that effort. So, you know, I hope that can help us shape a more useful and specific conversation in this next round. You know, like there was you know, the comment, I think it was Mr. Haig's about you know, how we go forward and what the discussion looks like in the next set of revision meetings for the second round of the plan. And the hope here is we spent a lot of time absorbing what were a lot of proposals, and through that we've filtered those which are great, those which are not desirable, and those which need some nuance. And in this next round, we look to have a very focused conversation on those which really have quite a bit of nuance but are important for the community. So I do feel that that we've gotten a lot of input, and as I've said, we're eager to reflect that in a revision.
Great. Well, I'll just, Mr. White.
Yeah, I would just make a comment that point number 4 of the city commission resolution is to receive a summary from the planning board. At this point, I think subject to the insertion of the comments that were made this evening by the board and by the public, I'm comfortable with having the summary that Matt has prepared go forward from the planning board to the city commission without having to come back to us again. So
absolutely.
I think that process can move forward, and the city commission then can take a look at that, at this report as maybe modified during the course of this meeting.
Great. So barring hearing any revolt from other members of the planning board on that, I think that's the wise move, and I agree with you. Matt, Sarah, I'd like to thank you again for all your efforts, not only tonight, but to date. You and the rest of the team, I'm sure it's not just the two of you. Jana, Nick, staff, everybody, for all your support, I thank you. Board, great comments here again tonight. I appreciate that. To the public, I appreciate you, particularly over the last 3 months, coming with a great spirit of cooperation and attempting to try and put forth the best plan. I will leave it at this as we wait and kind of say goodbye to the master plan for a few months until we see draft 2. I've heard a number of comments, and I heard it again tonight, about this needs to be a plan for the people who are here and paid here now. The only comment I'll make to that is one to get you to think, is that this is a plan for 2040. In 2040, without being too dark, there are a number of members on this call that will not be here. And in fact, there are a number of people that do not live in this community that will not only be members of our community, but maybe members of this board or the city commission. So as we sit here and talk about a master plan, we're talking about 20 years from now. So we need to balance what's best for those that are here now with what's best for this community in the future, knowing that our population is going to change. And frankly, that's a good thing. With that, thank you all. Let us close the book on this topic and move on to item number 2, a status update on our study session, or study session item, pardon me. Anna.
Yes. Well, as you all know, we've been talking about the master plan at our study sessions for a long time now. So a lot of the other items that we had been working on, ordinance amendments and so on, had been put on hold as we reviewed the master plan. And Chairman Klein and myself had talked, and he felt it was advisable for us to just kind of go through some of those things that we have outstanding that we've already started on, or that we might want to move up to the next things to do on the April study session, because we're not going to have any master plan discussion. So I'm just going to give a little brief review of where we stand on some of these topics. Glazing standards, I know you all remember that we talked about glazing quite a bit. The last time it was talked about was in August of 2020, and there was no action taken at that time. I think if you remember, we had representatives from a glass company come and attend the meeting, and they clarified quite a lot of things. I think we were very close to moving forward on this. With, you know, when I say very close, I mean within a meeting or two of having a public hearing, potentially. But we've been there before on glazing, so there's no guarantee. I'm just saying, I think that's why I put it towards the top of the list. Okay. Second, solar panel discussions. We did have quite a bit of discussion on solar panels and whether we should change the review process to basically, along with the sustainability initiatives, to encourage people to use solar panels. Where we left off, we talked about wanting to bring in an expert, just like we did on the glass front, because it was very helpful to have somebody in the industry come in and talk about the different issues and questions that the board had. So I think we talked about getting an expert in on solar panels, and also one of the concerns the board had was ground mounted mechanical equipment or batteries, et cetera, that might be associated with the rooftop equipment and how to handle that. So again, that's something that it seemed like we were getting closer on, and with a little more study and maybe bringing in an expert, we could be getting close. Dumpster screening, if you recall, boy, it's been a while now. I think we talked about this. I was surprised to find out last time in August of 2019. So it's been a while. But this was a simple matter, and that was with regards to the screening of outdoor dumpsters. You know, we require 6-foot masonry screen walls with a wooden gate. And the issue had come up with several reviews in the recent past where they wanted to do metal screening around the dumpster area or mechanical equipment or what have you, and it would have actually complemented the design of the building and fit in with the design of the site. So we wanted to essentially allow that. So that's where that stands. So that was fairly simple. We talked about, I think we talked about not allowing cyclone fencing and all of this kind of thing, but all we really need to do is potentially add a few other material options for screening around dumpsters. The next item to consider is outdoor dining enclosures. And while we've definitely talked about outdoor dining enclosures at this level, right now, as you know, at least pre-COVID, isinglass was not permitted for enclosing outdoor dining areas. We actually amended the ordinance a few years ago to remove the use of a lot of isinglass. Obviously, during the COVID-19 pandemic, the City Commission did pass some temporary resolutions to allow the use of isinglass and similar enclosure systems. And then they also received a letter from Roast Coffee Shop in November or December asking, hey, can we just have a permanent enclosure system of some kind for our outdoor dining area? And they were arguing that they were private property, which they're not. In fact, they would have been using public property. But it started a whole discussion at the City Commission level with, should we allow some type of enclosures for outdoor dining systems? If so, should it only be for non-liquor licensed establishments? Or if it is for liquor type establishments, is it only for bistros? Is it only for economic development? Is it only for quota licenses? And do we create a distinction between those three types of licenses? Or do we draw a distinction between whether it's on public or private property? So I know that's going to enter into a whole complex issue again, and certainly at the planning department level, we've had a lot of feedback about these temporary enclosures during the COVID-19 pandemic. So this one's going to take a little longer, but in December of 2020, the City Commission did in fact direct the planning board to study outdoor dining enclosures and to consider whether to allow them on a permanent basis, and if so, to what type of establishments and attached conditions or restrictions, regulations, etc. So that one will take a little bit more time, but it was a specific direction of the City Commission. The fifth item on the list is wall art. Now, this is going to be a new one to you, but this is something that we've been talking about at other boards. And Nick, I'm going to ask you to join in if you need to. Essentially, the Public Arts Board and the Design Review Board have been talking about this. Right now, we don't allow any signs to be painted on buildings. So while that sounds like a good thing for the most part, because you don't want to advertise, you know, Fred's Suits or what have you, there are many distinctive art pieces that have been placed in communities around us that are placed on buildings in the form of murals, whether they're an illustration of an actual scene or person or situation or just abstract. We've had a lot of different businesses ask for that type of thing to be added in Birmingham, and we don't allow it. It's considered a sign, regardless of whether it has a commercial message on it. If it attracts attention to the business, then it's considered a sign. So we don't allow it, and we also don't allow it to be painted directly onto the surface of buildings. So the Public Arts Board has been talking about this, and they think that the use of murals would be, in fact, quite nice at certain locations in the city, such as, I'll give you an example, though it's not on a building, the popcorn box in front of the Birmingham 8 Theater. That's on a mechanical box, but it's essentially just painting of something to give it character, make it stand out, add a little artistic influence. So along those lines, could we do that on buildings? And right now it's not permitted. So the Public Arts Board had talked about it, and the Design Review Board has also talked about it. And I think, and Nick, if you want to give an update on their specific thoughts, essentially what it's going to come down to is zoning ordinance amendments that would be required, which is why we would have to take it up at the planning board level, not only with regards to the definitions, to add or change a definition for either signage or adding a definition for public art to differentiate it from signage. And then Article 7 to establish a process for the review. So should it go to the Public Arts Board first? Should it go to the Design Review Board? How do we want that review process to work? Did you want to add anything, Nick?
No, just that essentially our plan is to have that all figured out before it comes here, so that you are given a set of recommendations that are as close to final as we can to zoning ordinance amendments. And the reason for that is that the review process is planned to be the Public Arts Board and the Design Review Board. Those murals would not necessarily come here unless they're part of an overall site plan. So I don't want to say it as though we don't want your opinion, but it's if we could have gone Design Review Board only, we may have, but this board is the arbiter of the zoning ordinance. So we want to make sure that to get your input and to make sure that you're comfortable with what we're proposing. And that's really it. And we're not that close yet, but it's coming.
It's in the works. Another thing I might add is that we were approached by, I can't remember the name of the group, but it was an Oakland County public arts type of group that was willing to sponsor a program with the DIA where they would actually pay and get an artist, design a mural, and install it and pay for all of that because they were interested in highlighting art in Birmingham. And of course, we don't allow that. So that's kind of what started it all, maybe probably a year ago, if not more. So the next item, number 6 on the list, the special land use permit review process. I think you're all pretty clear on what that process is. However, Mary Kacharik, our city attorney, our acting city attorney now, she has indicated that she thinks the language needs to be clarified a little because it does say that the special land use permits come in and the city commission directs them to the planning board for recommendations on the site plan and the special land use permit. And then it goes to the city commission for final approval, which is exactly what we do. But she's concerned that it kind of sounds like maybe they should consider it first and then send it to us and then send it back to them. So she just wants to clarify that. Number 7, medical marijuana regulations. There've been a lot of changes in the medical marijuana area, and the city attorney would recommend that regardless of what we do, that we do at least amend the zoning ordinance to address this issue, even if it's to say, just to limit it to, for instance, the home occupancy plans in their home, and you can't stop them from doing that. So if we can't stop them, are there any regulations that we want to impose and put in place to make sure that we're not going to have odor problems and so on? Number 8, the last one, comes, obviously, we just talked about electric vehicles and autonomous issues. Are there some other things that we want to consider studying? And maybe this would be better for our action list discussion. We haven't talked about so much, but there's a big impetus and push for electrical vehicle charging stations now. In Ferndale, for instance, to the south, in Ann Arbor, they've actually put regulations in their ordinances that require private developments to include that, and then put standards in place as to how many, what type to charge, etc. So that might be something that the board might want to talk about as well. So the main question is there any consensus on which one of these you want us to tackle first for April? I guess maybe if we take 3 items, we already have 1 item on the April study session agenda because I believe you postponed a site plan review. Yes, for 720 North Old Woodward, the Vinewood SLUP. So we'd have the space to do 2 more study session items if we're still in virtual mode, and I can give you an update on the whole virtual mode thing whenever you like as well.
Okay. Board, any input, any comments? Mr. Boyle.
Just a quick comment and a reminder to Nick that many years ago when he sat in class, I told him that the 3rd rail of planning was public art. So let's put that at the very end.
You're lucky Brooks isn't on this call from the Public Arts Board. He might have a thing or 2 to say about that.
He never listened to me. He never did. So I mean, so it just shows you. I mean, don't just stay away. Stay away.
It does remind me of a quote out of context, actually, but not knowing what it is, but knowing it when I see it. And I'm sure Mr. Williams will know what I'm talking about there.
I think we all do.
Mr. Jeffries.
My vote would be to whatever 2 Jana thinks are the lowest hanging fruit, because we seem to have a whole bunch of those, and we're gonna have to be refreshed on them probably, but whatever 2 we think we can get off that plate.
Yeah.
So maybe I should just talk about the action list that I made up, Jana, just because I think I tried to
do this for us, right, Nick?
a little bit. I did try to do it for us. So I
Let's just
did
jump to that
change-
item right now. Go jump in.
Yeah, that's all right. And we can talk about it then. I'll pull it up. So I did try to snipe those low hanging fruits in the solar panel and window glazing because we were so close. I think we're within 1 meeting of a public hearing on those. I structured
don't
it.
see the dumpster screening on your list, Nick. That was
So-
a pretty low hanging fruit too, I think.
Yeah, and the reason I made it this way is because the way I understand action lists to be, this is supposed to be somewhat of a year action list. And the way it was structured before was like just a compendium of 1,000 ideas that have been brought up by 1,000 people put into one table. And it didn't seem actionable. It didn't seem like it was good for progress in a way. So I wanted to cut it down a little bit. And it is down here, Jana, in the next up. So this, obviously, you guys, if you want to move it around, move it up, move it down, what have you. I put solar panels and windows because it was easy. I put outdoor dining closures next because I think that's going to be quite pressing in the fall. Because I think restaurants are still going to need to try to recoup some of their losses. So that's going to come up sooner than later. And it's a little bit bigger of a task, but still manageable. The SLUP application process is another one. We can kind of follow up that longer, maybe more strenuous outdoor dining enclosure conversation with a really easy SLUP application process update. We can move to wall art or we can move to dumpsters. We're starting to get into our slow season here, if you will. The winter's a little slower for us. So these are kind of just more back end type things that aren't, I didn't think were pressing necessarily, but are good to start. And we can kind of roll into the next year with them. So there's other things here on the next up thing, but I wanted to keep it to 8 because 8 seemed manageable. There's 4 quarters in a year. Could you do 2 a quarter? At least start 2 a quarter. I thought it was possible, but I was looking for input. I know this is kind of a lot different than what you're used to seeing, but I thought it might help in terms of just getting it done a little bit faster.
Thank you,
when we
Nick.
have goals like this.
I will say that I do like it. I think it's very clean and easy to read. Thank you. Mr. Williams.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at this realistically, we've got about 3 months to get what we want to get done on this list. Because once the master planning process starts again, and it could be as early as August, right? So, and maybe even July. So you've really got April, May, and June. So I think we go with 2 in April and 3 in May, and we need to revisit something in June. By then, we're going to be back in the 2040 master plan again. And as we know, based on public attendance, it's hard to get anything else done. So I think we can probably at least start 8. Maybe we rank wall art 8 of 8. But we can at least start April, May, and June and get as far as we can get in those 3 months, because I think come July, we're going to be busy.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I might also say that if the city attorney, acting city attorney, and the city commission have talked about medical marijuana, you probably need to move it higher than 7th on the list. That's just a gut reaction. But we might pull that up along with outdoor dining, just to make sure we hit that, and then the rest can be kind of fill in as we have time. I mean, it's going to take you a while on some of these to just collect information, right?
Yes.
Other comments from other members of the board? Ms. Boyce, I think we're muted here. There we go.
Yeah, I would just suggest that maybe the outdoor dining does get moved up to as soon as we can start to talk about it, because I have a feeling it's going to take us some time to figure that one out. And like you said, Nick, they're probably going to be looking to having something in place for the next winter months. And I could see it taking us that long to work through it. So if we could move that up, and I imagine you have a bit of, behind the scenes work to do before you bring it to us, but that seems important to me.
Right. Yeah.
Other comments from the board? No, seeing none. I mean, I think you hit it on the neck, hit it on the head, with maybe some minor tweaks that you've heard tonight. Good enough, Nick?
Good enough. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Excellent.
Now, with regards to April, though, I kind of heard 2 things. One, is there low-hanging fruit we can knock off, or do we get started on outdoor dining or some of those more complex?
Well, Jan, I don't know that you and Nick are going to be ready with anything on outdoor dining in first meeting in April, are you?
I don't think so, no.
So maybe let's bang out the 2 low-hanging fruit, and then the most important things after that are outdoor dining, SLUP, and medical marijuana, since the city attorney and city commission weighed in on them, and we just take them as we can. But Ms. Boyce is correct that the outdoor dining would be the most important. We just got to get to what we can get to, right? When you're ready.
Okay. The SLUP language one would be very fast.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Scher?
Well, that was gonna be my point, is the SLUP will be very quick. Now, if the city attorney is just gonna have a recommendation, I don't think it'll take us long to work through that.
Right. All right, let's move that one up till April then. And then
Okay.
take either glazing or solar panels, whatever we think is appropriate, we can bang out, and then we'll come back in the next meeting, hopefully with outdoor dining and whatever's left.
Okay.
Start working the list.
Sounds good.
Excellent.
Okay, well, we do need a motion on the action list for you to accept, whatever wording you want to use, accept, adopt, etc. Because we will be putting it in the annual report that gets reported to the city commission by the end of March.
So a motion to accept the action list as amended tonight for 2021. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Anybody interested in such a motion?
And I had a question. Do we recommend this action list to the city commission, or isn't that?
No, I think this is really just us accepting it. They're going to tell us what to do anyway, right?
Yeah, I know. Well, I know. Is this from us to them, or is this from them to us?
This is at this point from you to them, because we put together an annual report that lists everything that the planning board has done over the past year. The DRB has done, the HDC, the Public Arts Board, the Multimodal Master or Multimodal Transportation Board.
I get it. Time out. Okay, so my motion is that we approve and recommend to the city commission for its consideration this list.
We have a motion by Mr. Williams. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Scher. Any conversation? I'll go to the public one last time. Is there anybody in the public that'd like to comment on the action list? Mr. Atu. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Just wanted to say thank you for including solar on the list. I've had solar panels for 10 years, and when I installed my solar panels, there were no rules on the books about them. A couple years later, when my neighbors installed theirs, they actually had to go in front of a board for, to beg for permission. And I went and spoke, on their behalf and told them that I was in support of it. And I'm glad that the city is trying to make it easier for residents to have solar panels on their homes. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. All right, seeing no other comments, we will bring it back to the board and let us call the roll.
Brian Williams,
Yes.
Daniel Scher,
Yes.
Janelle Whipple-Boyce,
Yes.
Robin Boyle,
Yes.
Scott Klein,
Yes.
Stuart Jeffries,
Yes.
Bert Kosek.
Yes.
Excellent. Motion unanimous. So we move into miscellaneous business and communications. No communications for A. B, Nick, your time on the agenda. Do you have something for us?
Yes, I do. But I say this every time. It's going to be quicker than the last time. So pretty soon you'll be able to read my mind and have an answer ready. This is the EM Bistro. So what basically they submitted for building permits, and I caught a little bit of a change on the interior layout as well as the outdoor dining layout. The outdoor dining layout was changed due to the city commission comments, which asked them to eliminate a patio that was formerly in the parking over here. So they need to update our plans. Long story short, easy. The city commission asked them to do that. The other change was up here. If you recall, there used to be like a little waiting area here, but they've reworked it to include literally just 2 more chairs. So the total number of interior seats is 48 now. Previously approved was 46. My question is this board amenable to an administrative approval of this change, or would you want them to come back for any sort of planning board review for the two chairs.
Nick, is this a bistro?
Yes, yep, EM Bistro, the
So
one at 470 North Old Woodward.
what does that do to their seating count? I mean, does it have any impact on the total number of seats allowed?
No, they're well under the 65.
Okay.
So that it does not jeopardize that figure at all.
Mr. Chair, I'd recommend administrative approval of this. It's a modest change and they're still well below the cap.
I agree.
Any dissenting opinions? I'm seeing some head shake, some thumbs up. No dissenting opinions? Approve away.
Cool, thank you.
Anything else, Nick? No?
Nope.
Alrighty. Draft agenda for March 24th. Yeah.
Yeah, 856 North Old Woodward, as well as 35001 Woodward, which is the parking lot / house site. Both of those are coming back. And then we have a new application that we received for a preliminary site plan and community impact study for a new 4-story building on South Old Woodward.
I wonder what that is.
Where on South Old Woodward?
300 and 394 South Old Woodward. I believe it's the Lutz building and Frank's Shoe Repair. And it also would include a portion of the property that the real estate office owns behind there.
Yes.
It's a multifaceted approach because they're going to have to shift a few property lines. So there's lot combos, lot splits, etc.
Okay. So full night. Excellent.
Full night.
All right then. Any other comments from the board? Any other business? Ms. Boyce?
Just one quick one. I just wanted to point out that our other student representative arrived a little late tonight. Jane Weinman is on our Zoom meeting now too.
Ah.
Oh yeah, up there.
Did you want to hear from her?
I'd like to at least say hello.
Okay. I will try to get
Yeah,
her.
yeah. Good evening.
Hi, I'm
Hello.
Jane. I haven't been receiving any of the emails to like join any of these Zooms. I don't know.
You have to sign up. Give me a call tomorrow at the office and I'll walk you through how to sign up for it.
Okay, thank you.
And the links are always on the website as well.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But welcome. Welcome. We're glad to have you here and look forward to lots of fun and land planning. In
Yes,
the next
thank
few
you
months.
for having me.
Welcome. Excellent. All right then. Any other business before this esteemed body? Mr. Boyle.
Mr. Chairman, just a small point that I wanted to bring up during the master plan conversation, and it's a little bit technical, but Jana, a number 8 are general directions that was on Matt's very comprehensive listing was further address connections to surrounding communities. Mr. Scheer might be able to put me right, but I think that is a requirement of the state regulations that at some stage in the plan, we have to actually say how the plan connects physically to properties in other jurisdictions surrounding the city. Am I right, Dan?
Yeah, I think it has to be addressed, but I believe there was a segment in the first draft that met that requirement. It's pretty easy to meet.
Okay, good. I just wanted to
The resolution adopted by the city commission addresses that topic also.
Well, that's actually the consultative piece rather than the connection piece, but.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify for myself. Thank you. No more.
All right. Well, with that, seeing no other business, thank you all for your time tonight, board. Thank you to the public. And this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Have a good
night,
night.
everyone.
Good night, guys.